So I don't really have any expertise to offer or to share. Can everybody hear me? No. So good I asked. I don't really have any expertise to share about mandates in the United States as U.S. public policy. I'm not trained in public health. I'm not trained in medicine. But I am trained in Jewish thought and Jewish law. And so what I can do as your Rav is to bring together the current events of the day and bring to light on them what Jewish law and Jewish wisdom might have to contribute to the discussion. So I guess in the United States, the primary question about mandates and what makes these kinds of constraints on our liberty possible is that whatever fundamental right is being restricted, there needs to be a compelling state interest. And so I just gave you a couple of examples on the screen of restrictions to our liberties that exist because of a compelling state interest. Convicted felons can't own guns. It's illegal to possess or transfer certain materials. And you can't yell fire in a shul on Yontif. Although last year we could have here. It's a pleasure to not be able to now this year. In 37 states, there are helmet laws. You ride a motorcycle, you got to have a helmet on. Amongst those 37 states, by the way, that mandate helmets are both Texas and Florida. So, broadly speaking, the question is a tension between individual rights and communal responsibilities. So Judaism and American values don't overlap entirely on these questions, and you really see that, I think, clearly in the case of these kinds of public health mandates. The values of America are rugged individualism, individual rights. I remember the book that my mom had when I was 10 or 11 years old, I'm okay, you're okay, followed up by another book, I'm okay, you're not so hot. I didn't read either of those books. But what we see is that the Protestant origins of the United States, with the emphasis on the individual and the salvation for the individual, very much maps on to the values of individualism in America, as opposed to Judaism, which has a thick communitarian streak. We say in the Talmud, Kol Yisrael Aravim ze b'zeh, all of Israel is responsible for one another. Even our property rights are not permanent. I bring that up now because this today begins the 7th year of a 7-year cycle of Shemitah, where even if you own a piece of agricultural land in the land of Israel, you are forbidden by the Torah from planting or sowing or reaping during this year of Shemitah, this year of release. And if you think about our religion's understanding of redemption, it's communal. We all came out of bondage in Egypt together. The doctrine of an attractive nuisance is pretty close to another law that we have in the Torah. The law of an attractive nuisance is that a landowner may be liable for injuries to children who trespass on land if the injury results from a hazardous object or condition of the land that's likely to attract children who are unable to appreciate the risk posed by the object or situation. Okay. in American law, the law of attractive nuisance only applies to kids. We assume that adults should be more conscientious, should be more aware, should be more responsible, should be smarter. The halakha knows better. And the halakha applies this law to both kids and adults. And the law is called ma'akeh. It's from the book of Deuteronomy. We spoke about it a couple of weeks ago in shul. And this is the verse. When you build a new house, and the houses in Israel had flat roofs, it didn't rain all that much there, you shall make a rail for your roof so that you don't fall off the roof. And bring blood guilt on your house if anyone, whether you or a guest or somebody who is a thief, violating your property and hops on your roof and falls off, you're liable. So, of course, one of the ways this is directly applicable today is a fence around a pool. Right? One of my friends just became a grandfather in San Diego. He had a pool in his backyard. The first thing he did, I don't know about the first thing, maybe a diaper genie was the first thing. But amongst the first things that Todd Kobernick did was to put up a fence around the pool so that it would be safe for the baby to come over and subsequently all babies to come over. That law in the Torah very well could have stood all by itself. And the rabbis could have legislated about how high the rail needed to be, and about whether there needed to be something beneath the rail, and how strong the rail had to be. And they did that, but they didn't leave it there. They understood that this example was not the only problem with safeguarding a dangerous situation. It was an example, and therefore we need to extrapolate from the example. Here's the law. There's no difference between a roof or anything else that's dangerous and likely to cause death to a person who might stumble. If, for instance, one has a well or a pit in his courtyard, he must build an enclosing ring this high, or cover it, put a pool cover on, so that a person shouldn't fall and die. And then the law continues. The sages have prohibited many things because they're dangerous to life. So this is a preventative measure to safeguard life. Well, what if somebody doesn't want to ride with a helmet? And they say, right, what's it to you, buddy, if I ride my hog, right, that was chosen specifically, if I ride my motorcycle without a helmet, I'm risking my life. And I'm willing to risk my life because I want to feel the wind through my hair. The halacha is he should be beaten for disobedience. His head shouldn't be cut off. His hand shouldn't be cut off. His helmet shouldn't be confiscated. But he should be beaten for disobedience. Because we have communal norms, and even if you can't recognize what's in your best interest, if you want to be part of our community, then you have to agree to abide by what we feel is in the best interests of the community. That was Maimonides who said that. Judaism is focused on law, but it doesn't stop there. In the 17th century, Yeshayahu Horowitz, also called the Shlah, which is an acronym for Shnei Luchot HaBrit, wrote that the allegorical meaning of making a railing is that one has to set limits on one's pride. The roof is the highest point of the house and symbolizes pride, and the railing represents a restriction on one's pride. For those of you who know a little Yiddish, gaiva is? Okay. Gaiva is pride, and gova is height. Okay. So that was about life and the protection of life. Let's see how far else Judaism goes in this stance of paternalism. When a man whom the law requires to be compelled to divorce his wife, when he doesn't want to divorce her, the court should have him beaten. There's a lot of beating going on. The court should have him beaten until he consents, at which time they write a get. The get is the writ of divorce, and the get is acceptable. So you can't write the get without him saying, write a get, which is its own problem. But once he says it, because you have put the thumb screws into him, that get, regardless of the fact that it is compelled, that it is coerced, it is still a valid legal document. And Maimonides wants to know why. How can any legal document be kosher if it's written under coercion? So here's his answer. Because the concept of being compelled against one's will only applies when speaking about a person who's being compelled and forced to do something that the Torah does not obligate him to do. For example, somebody who was beaten until he consented to a sale or to give a present. But in this case, that's not what's happening. It's the person's evil inclination, their Yetzer Hara, that's pressing him to reject the observance of a mitzvah or to commit a transgression, and he is beaten until he performs the action that he was obligated to perform. And when he does that, he's not considered to have been forced against his will. On the contrary, it was he himself and his Yetzer that was forcing him to transgress the Torah. With regard to this person who refuses to divorce, he wants to be part of the Jewish people. He wants to perform all of the mitzvot and eschew all the transgressions. It's only his Yetzer Hara that attacks him and makes him vindictive and vengeful and want to leave his wife in a permanent state of straw widowhood. Therefore is beaten until his Yetzer has been weakened and he consents, and he's considered to have performed the divorce willfully. So that is about liberty. The liberty of the wife takes precedent over the man's right to initiate a divorce. Okay, now I'm going to imitate a singer who doesn't have such a good voice, which compounds my voice. A man needs a maid. Who is it? All right, there we go. We are now going from life to liberty to property. Indeed, the first draft of Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence said the pursuit of life, liberty, and property, a line that he got from Locke. But in subsequent revisions to Jefferson's Declaration, the property line was changed to the pursuit of happiness. Here we go. Plony's Gentile maid had a reputation for being abusive and a habitual slanderer. The community decided to place a 6-month ban on any Jew deriving benefit from this woman, which means that Plony has to unemploy her for 6 months because the community has said he can't benefit from anything she does because she's a no-goodnik. Plony objected, but he was overruled by the majority. And at that point, the majority sent a query. It sent a sheila, a question, to the leading rabbinic authority, explaining the case and asking whether the majority's ban should be upheld even against a minority's objection. The answer, and I quote, "All Israelites are obligated to coerce and compel one another to live in accordance with truth, justice, God's laws, and teachings. You want to be part of our community? You need to live by our norms, and we look out for one another. We try to create a society where people bless one another for being kind." And who decides what is enforced? Those laws? Acharei rabim lahatot. After the rabbis incline, after the majority incline, right? Follow the rabbis who say to follow the experts. That's the tradition. But in this country, and I'm still talking about the Jewish community in this country, I will be honest with you. I know that 2/3 of my time as the rabbi of AJ have been COVID, but I haven't gotten a lot of questions about what to do, right? Every once in a while, somebody will call me about a pot, right, that got trafed up, and how do I re-kosher the pot? And by the way, I'm not looking for calls. I'm welcome. Feel free, but this isn't a solicitation. So Orthodoxy and conservative Judaism still have the ideology that halakha is obligatory. Halakha has a claim on our behavior, but the major denomination that rejects that kind of rabbinic authority is Reform. Reform Judaism is all about individual autonomy, which makes it a perfect religion for America. In practice, almost all Jews who belong to conservative synagogues reject conservative ideology. We belong to conservative synagogues because Hebrew school doesn't conflict with soccer, because it's closer than the other shul, because it's where I was bar bat mitzvah, because the clergy are cute. There can be all kinds of reasons why people belong to an institution irrespective of the ideology of the movement. And what that means is that we are the most hypocritical of the three movements, because our ideology says that we are a halachic movement, but yet next to no, I'm not going to say no conservative Jews, but relatively few conservative Jews are halachic. Reform Judaism, it's really impossible to be hypocritical because you get to make up your own rules. And in Orthodoxy, although they are not devoid of hypocrites, more Jews tend to do more mitzvot within the Orthodox world. But here's the thing. Hypocrisy isn't the worst thing in the world. Immorality is. We need to remember that. And on the subject of morality, we're doing okay. We're doing okay, and in my opinion, we're doing better than the Orthodox, who still seem to have a problem recognizing the full autonomy of women and the full autonomy of gay and lesbians. I want to read this again from the Shlah. The allegorical meaning of making such a railing may be that one has to set limits to one's pride, one's ego. The roof is the highest point of the house and symbolizes pride. The railing represents a restriction on one's pride. Who is any individual in the community to rail against public mandates, public health mandates, the experts? And one of the values of Judaism is education and expertise. And when the majority of the experts who have done the studying and ostensibly have the knowledge make a recommendation that prevents danger and promotes health, I think what the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, what Yeshayahu Horowitz is saying is, who are we to think that our individual opinion is somehow more perceptive or more accurate than the majority of experts in this case? So mandates are indeed kosher when a majority of experts mandate preventative safety measures or any kind of norms for the community, whether it be about life or liberty or, as we saw, even property. Judaism requires compliance. And the goal of this is to create a society where we feel indebted to one another for looking after us, for having our backs, for knowing that if we get into a pickle, that it'll be a kosher pickle, and we've got a community to fall back upon and to rely on. And what we're going to talk about tomorrow is whether that community, now that we no longer live exclusively in a Jewish community, is restricted to Jews, or the circle of responsibility needs to be expanded. L'shana tova.